Chapter 5, The Steeds of Mars. The case of Abraham Rockenbach and David Herlisius, who wrote about the year 1600, and who were informed on the matter of the comets of antiquity, shows that the contents of some old manuscripts were known to the scholarly world then, though not to modern scholars now. A scholar in a pamphlet, Jonathan Swift, in his Gulliver's Travels, 1726, wrote, loved that tale, that the planet Mars had 2 satellites, very small ones. Certain astrologers have likewise discovered 2 lesser stars, or satellites, which revolve about Mars, whereof the innermost is distant from the center of the primary planet exactly 3 of its diameters, and the outermost 5. The former revolves in the space of 10 hours, and the latter in 21.5, which evidently shows them to be governed by the same law of gravitation that influences other heavenly bodies. Actually, Mars has 2 satellites, mere rocks, one being as small as about 10 miles in diameter, the other only 5 miles. Questionable. One travels around Mars 7 hours and 39 minutes, the other in 30 hours and 18 minutes. Their distance from the center of Mars is even less than Swift said it was. They were discovered by A$AP Hall in 1877 with the optical instrument of the days of Swift. They could not have been seen, and neither Newton nor Halley, the contemporaries of Swift, nor William Herschel in the 18th, or Leverrier in the 19th century, suspected their existence. It was bold of Swift to assume their very short periods of revolution, months, measured only in hours. It was a very rare coincidence indeed. If Swift invented these satellites, guessing correctly not only their existence but also their number too, and especially their very short revolutions, this passage of Swift aroused the literary critic's wonder. It is an even chance that Swift invented the 2 satellites of Mars, and thus by a rare accident came close to the truth. But it may also have been that Swift had read about the Trebanks in some text not known to us or to his contemporaries. The fact is that Homer knew about the 2 steeds of Mars that drew his chariot. Virgil also wrote about them. When Mars was very close to the Earth, his 2 Trabants were visible. They rushed in front of and around Mars. And the disturbances that took place, they probably snatched some of Mars' atmosphere, dispersed as it was, and appeared with gleaming manes. The steeds were yoked when Mars, Ares, prepared to descend to the Earth on a punitive expedition. Like in Remembering the End of the World. When A$AP Hall discovered the satellites, he gave them the name Phobos, which means terror, and Deimos, rout, the 2 steeds of Mars, without fully realizing what he did. He gave the satellites the same names by which they were known to the ancients. Whether or not Swift borrowed his knowledge of the existence of the 2 Trabants of Mars from the ancient astrological work, the ancient poets knew of the existence of the satellites of Mars.
the terrible ones. Venus had a tail, considerably shortened since the time it was a comet, but still long enough to give the impression of a hanging flame, or smoke, or attached hair. When Mars clashed with Venus, asteroids, meteorites, and gases were torn from this trailing part, and began a semi-independent existence, some following the orbit of Mars, some other paths. These swarms of meteorites with their gaseous appendages were newborn comets, flying in bands and taking various shapes. They made an uncanny impression. Those which followed Mars closely looked like a troop following their leader. They also ran along different orbits, grew quickly from small to giant size, and terrorized the peoples of the Earth. And when, soon after the impact of Venus and Mars, Mars began to threaten the Earth, the new comets, running very close to the Earth, added to the terror, continually recalling the hour of peril. Hours of Homer, going into battle, is accompanied by never-resting horrible creatures, terror, rout, and discord. Terror and rout yoke the gleaming horses of Ars, themselves dreadful beasts, also known by these names: discord, sister and comrade of manslaying Ars, rageth incessantly, she at the first rears her crest but little, yet thereafter planteth her head in heaven, while her feet tread on earth. Similarly, the Babylonians saw the planet Mars Nergal in a company of demons, and wrote in their hymns to Nergal-Q10, great giants, raging demons, with awesome members, run at his right and at his left.
These raging demons are pictured also in the Nergal-Ereskikal poems bring pestilence and cause earthquakes. It appears that the mythological figures of the Furies of the Latins or the Erinyes of the Greeks, with serpents winding about their heads and arms, flashing flame with their eyes, swinging torches around like wheels, grew out of the same prodigies which moved rapidly, changed their forms hourly, and acted violently. The Erinyes travelled in a group, like huntresses or like a pack of savage hounds, 12, but sometimes they appeared to be split into two groups. 13 to these comets, travelling in bands with Mars or Indra, are
dedicated many Vedic hymns, indeed a great part of them. They are called Maruts, shining like snakes, blazing in their strength, brilliant like fires. 14 O Indra, O strong hero, grant thou glory to us, with the Maruts, terrible with the terrible ones,
strong and giver of victory. 15 And it is said that their strength is like the vigor of their father.
Your march, O Maruts, appears brilliant. We invoke you, the great Maruts, the constant wanderers. Like the dawn, they uncover the dark nights
with red rays, the strong ones, with their brilliant light, as with a sea of milk, streaming down with rushing splendor, they have assumed their bright and brilliant color. 16 Stones were hurled by these comets. You the powerful, who shine with your spears, shaking even what is unshakable by strength, hurling the stone in the flight. All beings are afraid of the Maruts. 17 May your march be brilliant, O Maruts, shining
like snakes with red rays, the strong ones, with their brilliant light. May that straightforward shaft of yours, O Maruts, bounteous givers, be far from us, and far the stone which you hurl at teen meteorites, when entering the Earth's atmosphere, make a frightful din. So did the Maruts, even by day the Maruts create darkness. Then from the shouting of the Maruts over the whole space of the Earth, men reeled forward. 19 This darkness and this din were narrated in scriptural and rabbinical sources, in Roman traditions, and in hymns to Nergal. As the similarity of the description of the terrible ones in the
Vedic hymns and in Joel is striking, but has not been noticed. A few more quotations should follow here. The comets, just beginning to whirl, looked like revolving torches or writhing snakes. They assumed the form of spinning wheels, and the celestial phantasmagoria appeared like swift chariots, changing their forms. The Maruts looked like horses racing along the sky, and then again like a host of warriors, leaping, climbing, irresistible. The verses of the second chapter of Joel 2:2-11 are given in their order, interspersed with verses taken from a number of Vedic hymns dedicated to the Maruts. Joel 2:2 A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness. As the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong, there hath not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. Vedic hymns. Even by day the Maruts create darkness. 20 The terrible Marut host of ever youthful heroes. 21 All beings are afraid of the Maruts, they are men terrible to behold, like kings. 22 Joel 2:3 A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. Nothing shall escape them. Vedic hymns like a blast of fire, blazing in their strength, brilliant like fires, and impetuous. 23 Joel 2 For the appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as all seamen, so shall they run. Vedic hymns at their racings, the earth shakes, as if broken. When on the heavenly path they harness for victory, they wash their horses like racers in the courses, they hasten with the points of the reed on their quick steeds. 24 Joel 2:5 Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Vedic hymns they are like headlong charioteers on their ways, they who are brilliant, of terrible design, powerful, and devourers of foes. On your chariots charged with lightning. Host of your chariots, terrible Marut hosts. 25 Joel 2:6 Before their face the people shall be much pained, all faces shall gather blackness. Vedic hymns at your approach the Son of Man holds himself down. You have caused men to tremble, you have caused mountains to tremble. 26 Joel 2:7 They shall run like mighty men, they shall climb the wall like men of war, and they shall march everyone on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Vedic hymns Your conquest is violent, splendid, terrible, full and crushing. The terrible train of untiring Maruts full of terrible designs, like giants. 27 Joel describes how these warriors, coming with fire and clouds, will run upon the wall, enter in at the windows, run to and fro in the city, and the sword can do them no harm. In similar terms the Vedic hymns describe the conquest by this terrible host. If there is any doubt as to the nature of the terrible ones, the following words should dissipate it. Joel 2:10 The earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. Maruts are often called shakers of heaven and earth. Vedic hymns You shake the sky, the terrible ones. Even what is firm and unshakable is being shaken. When they whose march is terrible have caused the rocks to tremble, or when the manly Maruts have shaken the back of heaven. Hide the hideous darkness, make the light which we long for! 28 The earth groaned, the meteorites the host of the Lord filled the sky with a battle cry, over the whole space of the
earth, and men reeled forward. These were, in Joel's words, the wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood, and fire, and pillars of smoke, when the sun is turned into darkness, and the moon into blood. The clouds, the fire, the terrifying din, the darkness in the middle of the day. The fantastic figures on the sky of speeding chariots, running horses, marching warriors. The trembling of the earth, the reeling of the firmament, were visualized, felt, and feared on the shores of both the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean, for they were not local disturbances, but displays of cosmic forces in cosmic dimensions. Joel did not copy from the Vedas nor the Vedas from Joel. In more than this one instance it is possible to show that peoples, separated even by broad oceans, have described some spectacle in similar terms. These were pageants, projected against the celestial screen.
That, a few hours after they were seen in India, appeared over Nineveh, Jerusalem, and Athens, shortly thereafter over Rome and Scandinavia, and a few hours later over the lands of the Mayas and Incas. The spectators saw in the celestial prodigies either demons, as the Erinyes of the Greeks, or the Furies of the Latins, or gods whom they invoked in prayers, as in the Vedas of the Hindus, or the executors of the Lord's wrath, as in Joel and Isaiah. In the section, Isaiah, we maintain that the army of the Lord was not the Assyrian host, but a celestial host. Isaiah called the army of the Most High, the terrible ones. And he will lift up an ensign to the nations from far, and will hiss unto them from the end of the earth.
And, behold, they shall come with speed swiftly, none shall be weary nor stumble among them, none shall slumber nor sleep, neither shall the girdle of their loins be loosed, nor the latchet of their shoes be broken, whose arrows are sharp, and all their bows bent, their horses' hoofs shall be counted like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring shall be like a lion. They shall roar like young lions, the mighty roaring, the wheels revolving like a whirlwind, the horses with hoofs of flint, the light darkened in heaven are once more common features. Vedic hymns. These strong, manly, strong-armed Maruts do not strive among themselves, firm are the horns, the weapons on your chariot, and on your faces are splendors 30 they who by their own might seem to have risen above heaven and earth. They are glorious like brilliant heroes, they shine forth like foe-destroying youths.
They who are roaring and hasting like winds, brilliant like the tongues of fire, powerful like mailed soldiers, who hold together like the spokes of chariot wheels, who glance forward like victorious heroes, who are swift, like the best of horses 32 The dreadful figures scattered a hail of meteorites that bombarded walls with hot gravel and flew into windows. Simultaneously cities were turned into heaps by the leaping ground. The multitude of the terrible ones is like small dust. Their invasion shall be at an instant suddenly. Says Isaiah 33 The Lord shall send his host with thunder, and with earthquake, and great noise, with storm and tempest, and the flame of devouring fire. These Maruts are men brilliant with lightning, they shoot with thunderbolts, they blaze with the wind, they shake the mountains. 34 Isaiah 25:4 says that the blast of the terrible ones is as a storm against the wall. Thou the Lord shalt bring down the noise of strangers. The branch of the terrible ones shall be brought low. 35 The Maruts are often called the terrible ones, the same term Isaiah used. The terrible ones of the Vedas were not common storm clouds, nor were the terrible ones of Joel and Isaiah human beings. Certainly only by chance did the similarity of names and pictures in the Vedas and the prophets escape the attention of students of religion. The Maruts are understood here as comets which in great numbers started to whirl in the sky on short orbits, after the impact of Mars and Venus. They followed and preceded the planet Mars. The name Mars, genitive, Mardus, would be of the same origin as Marut. It is therefore gratifying to read that the philological relation has already been established. 36 It is even more satisfactory that this philological equation was made without knowledge of the actual relation between the planet Mars and the terrible ones. By comparing Hebrew historical, Chinese astronomical, and Latin ecclesiastical material, we have established that it was the planet Mars which caused a series of catastrophes in the 8th and 7th centuries before this era. The Greek epos explained how it happened that Venus ceased and Mars began to be a threat to the Earth. In heavenly battles, Ares or Nergal, both known as the planet Mars, had an entourage of demoniac figures. The name Mars is derived from the Indian Marut, Maruts. The terrible ones are the terrible ones of Isaiah and Joel. The origin of the Greek name Ares was debated by philologists. 37 And reasons against a common root with the identical Mars were admitted. It seems to me that just as Mars is derived from Marut, the terrible ones of the Vedas, so Ares was formed from the terrible one of the Hebrew, which, as used by Joel and Isaiah, is Ares. In a no longer extant passage of Pliny there was something said about comets being produced by planets. 38 Also the Sushal chart refers to occasions in the past when comets were born from planets, from Mars, Venus, and others. Velikovsky, Emmanuel. Worlds in Collision Paradigma Limited. Kindle edition.
Samples from the planets. In the Vedic hymns, the Maruts are implored to be far from us, far the stone which you hurl. When comets pass close to the Earth, stones occasionally fall. Classic case in that of the meteorite that fell at Egospotanami when a comet shone in the sky. The Hindu book Vara Sanhita sees the meteorites, portents of devastation by fire and earthquake. Since the planets were gods, stones hurled by them or by the comets created in their encounters were feared as divine missiles. And when they fell, they found they were worshipped. The stone of Kronos at Delphi, the image of Diana at Ephesus, which, according to Acts 19:35, was the image which fell down from Jupiter. The stones of Ammon and Seth at Thebes were meteorites. Also, the image of Venus on Cyprus was a stone which fell from the sky. The palladium of Troy was stone that fell on the earth from Pallas Athene, the planet Venus. The sacred stone of Tyre, too, was a meteorite related to Astarte, the planet Venus. Traveling about the world, she, Astarte, found a star falling from air,
or sky, which she taking up consecrated on the holy island Tyre at Apatia in Syria.
A meteorite fell, which was thought to be Astarte herself, and the temple to Astarte was built there. Festivals were regularly timed to coincide with the appearance of Venus as the morning or evening star. The stone on which the Temple of Solomon was built, Iban Shitaya, or Firestone, is a bolide that fell in the beginning of the 10th century, in the time of David, when a comet, which bore the appearance of a man with a sword, was seen in the sky. The sacred shield of Numa at Rome, the ensign of Roman Mars, was a bolide that fell from the sky in the beginning of the 7th century, and its origin was connected with Mars. In the years when the planet Mars had long been pacified, its position was still watched when meteorites fell. Thus the Chinese wrote in 211, the planet Mars being in the neighborhood of Antares, a star fell at Chongqing and arrived to the ground. It changed to a stone. The people of the place cut a prophecy of evil for the emperor on the stone, and the emperor had it destroyed. Carving messages to peoples or kings on fallen stones was known before and has been practiced since. One of the stones that fell from the sky is still worshipped today. It is the black stone of Kaaba in Mecca. Now its surface is black from being touched and kissed innumerable times. But under its cover of dirt, it retains its original reddish color. It is the holiest thing in Mecca, built into the wall of Kaaba, and pilgrims travel thousands of miles to kiss it.
Kaaba is older than Mohammedanism. Muhammad, in the early part of his career, worshipped Venus, Al-Uzza,
and other planetary gods, which even today enjoy great veneration among the Muslims as the daughters of the god. The black stone of Kaaba, according to Muslim tradition, fell from the planet Venus. But another legend says that it was brought down by the Archangel Gabriel. Granted that this legend may conceal some information about the origin of the stone, we ought to ask ourselves, who is the Archangel Gabriel? The Archangels. In the scriptures, the destruction of the army of Sennacherib is said to have been caused by a blast. A few verses later, it is said to have been the act of an angel of God. The Talmudic and Midrashic sources, which relate to the army of Sennacherib, was destroyed by a blast and scourge accompanied by a terrible din. On the night following the day when the shadow of the sun returned 10 degrees. Or more specific, the scourge was inflicted by the Archangel Gabriel in the guise of a column of fire. In the present research, it has been established that it was the work of Mars. Are archangels planets? An old tradition dating back to Aeonic times had it that there are 7 archangels, each of whom is associated with a planet. 7 archangels were believed to play an important part in the universal order through their association with the planets and the constellations. There is some variation in the different versions in the angels assigned to the planets. In some medieval writings, Gabriel is associated with the moon, but in 1 or 2 with Mars. The following, however, makes the identification of Gabriel possible. Gabriel is connected with the foundation of Rome. The Jewish legend says that when Solomon took the daughter of Pharaoh to wife, the Archangel Gabriel descended from heaven and inserted a reed in the sea. About this reed, more and more earth was gradually deposited, and on the day of which Jeroboam erected the golden calves, a little hut was built on the island. This was the first dwelling place of Rome. Here, Gabriel is cast in the role the Romans ascribed to Mars, that of the founder of Rome. Our assumption that it was the planet Mars which caused the destruction of the army of Sennacherib in the spring of 687 BC. It is implied also by rabbinical sources, since the Archangel Gabriel is another name for the planet Mars. The ancient Jews knew about the origin of the blast and the identity of the angel of the Lord, who destroyed the Assyrian army. Gabriel is the angel appointed over fire. He is also, according to Origin, the angel of war. Thus, we again recognize him, Mars, Nergal. The rabbinical tradition says that the Assyrians of the host of Sennacherib, before they died, were permitted by Gabriel to hear the song of the celestials, which can be interpreted as the sound caused by a close approach of the planet. The words of Isaiah 33:3, at the noise of the Talmud, Hammon, the people fled, should, according to the Jewish traditions as related by Jerome, refer to Gabriel, Hammon being another of his names. The planet Mars is red. A Medim, the one who reddens, is the name for Mars in the Hebrew astronomical texts. One text says, the Holy One created Mars, Medim, that he should throw them, the nations, down into hell. A few rabbinical sources attributed the destruction of Sennacherib's army to the action of the Archangel Michael. Some ascribe it to both archangels. Who, then, is the Archangel Michael? The entire story of the Exodus is connected with the Archangel Michael. In Exodus 14:19, the pillar of fire and the cloud is called Angel of God, according to the Midrash. It was the Archangel Michael who made himself a wall of fire between the Israelites and the Egyptians. Michael is said to be made of fire. The Haggadah states, Michael was appointed high priest of the celestial sanctuary, at the same time that Aaron was made high priest of Israel. That is, in the time of the Exodus. Michael was also the angel who appeared to Joshua, son of Nun. The celestial struggle at the Sea of Passage is depicted in the familiar image of the Archangel Michael slaying the dragon. Michael produces fire by touching the earth, and it is the emanation of this archangel that was seen in the burning bush. He has his abode in heaven and is the forerunner of Shekinah, or God's presence. But as Lucifer, Michael falls from heaven, and his hands are bound by God. All these attributes and acts of Archangel Michael led us to recognize which planet he represents. It is Venus. The Archangel Michael, or the planet Venus, and the Archangel Gabriel, or the planet Mars, saved the people of Israel on two dramatic occasions. At the Sea of Passage, when the hosts of Egypt, pursuing the fleeing slaves, could be seen in the distance, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. They were sore afraid. The sea was torn apart, and the slaves walked on the bottom of the sea and reached the other shore. Their enemies were thrown high by the released tides, which fell down when a spark passed between Venus and the earth. 800 years passed after the Exodus. The Assyrian host, which a generation earlier had removed the 10 tribes of Israel to an exile from whence they never returned, invaded Judea with the express purpose of crushing rebellious Judea and removing him from his homeland and from the scene of history. A blast from the planet Mars fell upon the camp of the Assyrians and annihilated it. Those rabbinical sources, which ascribes this act to both archangels, were not wrong. Venus pushed Mars toward Earth, and thus both were instrumental in destruction. The author of the apocryphal book of the Assumption of Moses knew that Venus and Mars are each as large as the whole earth. Because of their intervention in moments when the national existence of Israel was at stake, Michael and Gabriel were looked upon as guardian angels of the eternal people. Gabriel is the Hebrew Hercules. Actually, the classic authors made it clear that Hercules is another name for the planet Mars. In the Gospel of Luke 1:26, Gabriel is the angel of annunciation to the Virgin. In the Roman Catholic Church, Michael is the conqueror of Satan, head of the host of heaven, the first of the saints after Mary. End of subchapter. Amazing how the meteorites keep falling on the enemy's head and not theirs too. You know, if it's an act of nature, it would be random. It doesn't sound like it's random at all. Planet worship in Judea in the 7th century. The Northern Kingdom, the process of disassociating the deity from the celestial object, had not yet been completed when the kingdom was destroyed, 723 or 722 BC, and its population was led away into captivity, from which they did not return. The tribes of Northern Kingdom left all the commandments
of the Lord their God, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven,
and served Baal. King 1716. Only a few years after the deliverance of Judea from the hand of Sennacherib, Manasseh, son of Hezekiah, built altars for all the host of heaven in the 2 courts of the house
of the Lord. 2 Kings 21:5. For he, Manasseh, built again high places, which Hezekiah his father had broken down. Hezekiah and he reared up altars for Baal. He made groves and worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. Chronicles 33:3. It was in the time of
Josiah, the grandson of Manasseh, and shortly before the exile of Judah to Babylon, that pure monotheism emerged as an outcome of the progress the Jewish people had made during its long struggle for national existence on the one hand, and for purification of its concept of God on the other. And the king, Josiah, commanded Hilkiah, the high priest, bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal, and for the grove, and for all the host of heaven.
and he burned them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and carried the ashes of them into Bethel.
And he put down the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah. What's with incense burning? I never got that. I know it smells good, but I remember burning incense as a kid. Well, when I was younger, but that was for a totally different reason. It was hip in the 70s to have a black light and burn incense to cover some other smells. But that's what's so cool about today. In the 70s, it was illegal. Now, when you get high, you're a shaman, and it's true. And in places round about Jerusalem, them also burned incense unto Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the hosts of heaven. 2 Kings 23:4-5. The scriptures do not hide the fact that in Judea, as well as in Israel, the planetary cult was the official cult, with the priests and with kings, with many prophets, and with people. Thus Jeremiah, contemporary of King Josiah, says, "At that time, saith the Lord,
They shall bring out the bones of the kings of Judah, and the bones of his princes, and the bones of the priests, and the bones of the prophets, and the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem,
out of their graves,
and they shall spread them before the sun, and the moon, and all the host of heaven, whom they have loved, and whom they have served, and after whom they have walked,
and whom they have sought,
and whom they have worshipped."
Jeremiah 8:1-2.
And again he says, "And the houses of Jerusalem and the houses of the kings of Judah shall be defiled as the place of Tophet."
Those said Tophet, because of all the houses upon whose roofs they have burned incense
unto all the host of heaven.
Jeremiah 19:13. In the days of Jeremiah and King Josiah, a scroll was found in the chamber of the temple, 2 Kings 22. It is generally thought that it was the book of Deuteronomy, the last book of the Pentateuch. Oh, I just love these words. The text of the scroll made a strong impression on the king.
"And lest thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon, and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven." Deuteronomy
4:19.
"Thou shalt not make thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath."
Which is a passage of the Decalogue, Exodus 24, verbatim.
"If there be found among you man or woman that hath wrought wickedness, and hath gone and served other gods, and worshipped them, either the sun or moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have not commanded, then thou shalt bring thou forth that man or that woman, and shall stone them with stones till they die." Brutal.
17:25. In them Thus, we see centuries-long struggle for the Jewish God, creator and not unanimated planet, itself a creation, being carried on in the closing decades before the exile to Babylon, with the help of the book whose authorship was ascribed to Moses. When the people of Jerusalem were exiled to Babylon and groups of refugees succeeded in escaping to Egypt, taking with them Jeremiah, and they said to him, "But we will certainly burn our incense onto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings onto her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings, and our princes, in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well, and saw no evil. But since we left off to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, we have wanted all things, and have been consumed by the sword and by the famine." It is apparent from this passage the population of Jerusalem that sought refuge in Egypt thought the national catastrophe fell upon their people, not because they had left the Lord God, but because in the days of Josiah and his sons they have ceased to worship the planetary gods of Manasseh, and especially the Queen of Heaven, the planet Venus. Of this remnant of the people that went to Egypt in the beginning of the 6th century, a military colony was established in Elephantine in southern Egypt. Documents, papyri, of this colony were unearthed in the beginning of this century. The Jewish colony in Elephantine faithfully worshiped Yahweh, the Lord of the sky, as the theophoric names of many members of the colony testify. Scholars were puzzled, however, to find on one of the papyri the name Amit Yahu. The Jewish colony of Elephantine faithfully worshipped Yahweh, the Lord of the sky, as the theophoric names of many members of the colony testify. Scholars were puzzled, however, to find on one of the papyri the name Anat Yahu. They were uncertain whether it belonged to a goddess or a place or a person. Anat is the familiar name of the Canaanite goddess identified with Athene in the Cyprian inscription. The historical facts revealed in the present research make the understanding of such cult easier. The dark tradition that it was the planet Venus that played such an important role in the days when the forebears of these refugees in the land of Egypt left the land, passed through the cataclysms of fire and water, sea and desert, was responsible for this syncretism of names. The Jewish people did not obtain all of its supremacy in that one day at the mountain of law-giving.
These people did not receive the message of monotheism as a gift. It struggled for it, and step by step, from the smoke rising from the overturned valley of Sodom and Gomorrah, from the furnace of affliction of Egypt, from the deliverance at the Red Sea amid the sky-high tides, from the wandering in the cloud-enshrouded desert burning with naphtha, from the internal struggle, from the search for God and
the desperate and heroic struggle for national existence on its narrow strip of land against the overwhelming empires of Assyria and Egypt, it became a nation chosen to bring a message of the brotherhood of man to all the peoples of the world.
The desperate and heroic struggle for national existence on its narrow strip of land against the overwhelming empires of Assyria and Egypt, it became a nation chosen to bring a message of the brotherhood of man to all the peoples of the world. Velikovsky, Immanuel. Worlds in Collision Paradigma Limited Kindle Edition.
Oh, just a few things, that I've picked up recently and I'd like to share. There's just, you see these patterns come from mainstream that I never saw before until my eyes were open. I think that the Hyperborea thing, where there was an empire at the North Pole, that I think that could make a lot of sense. It was a polar alignment. Velikovsky says there was most likely more than one cataclysm, and all these changes could have taken place over the course of 20, 30, 40,000 years. They have fossils of 100-foot mushrooms. There could have been an Atlantis-type structured society, and they lived in the North Pole. They were centered there. Or one could argue it was centered in the South Pole. And there's just a lot of things that's really shady about that whole thing. Like, they're not telling us, you know? And, I mean, they've been so wrong on so many things, but they just take it in stride. And even today, if you have a theory it does not fit their paradigm, it'll just be ignored. No matter how much evidence you have, or how strong it is, they continue along, the blind leading the blind. Space probes looking at comets always produces unexpected data. They thought Mars at one time was a cold, dead planet and Venus was balmy. And that's not right. You know, it's amazing coincidence that before Velikovsky was confirmed on Venus, the scientific thinking was that it was probably about 20 degrees hotter Fahrenheit. And after his theory was confirmed with the heat, they said, well, of course it's hotter. It's closer to the sun. It's not that close to the sun where it can melt lead. There is an atmosphere and water on Mars. I don't believe that 1% baloney. If the atmosphere on Mars is 1% of that of the Earth, then how could a parachute slow down a descending rover? I definitely think something's going on under the ground there with them glass tunnels and finding infrared signatures equal to a city on them pictures earlier in the video. Come on. Now they can even talk about climate change on Mars. Well, they're not driving SUVs. Nobody can explain the origin of Mars' small moons, except the electric universe. They can't even explain the bright spots on Ceres. Before 1965, the thinking by Standard Model for Jupiter was that it was just a cold, dead planet. Could not hold any star-like characteristics. Lieutenant Cosmos Carl Sagan say that Jupiter is a failed star. However, in 1996, it was found that its atmosphere was just as turbulent and stormy as that of a star. And it was found that heat escapes from it. Both Saturn and Jupiter give off more energy than they take in from the sun. Plus they emit radio signals like a star. The rings, like Saturn, with all that water ice going around, nobody's put two and two together that maybe our water could have came from there. Io is different from anything in the solar system. Interferes with Jupiter's magnetic field. Saturn's F ring defies the law of gravitational physics. The B ring has electromagnetic spokes. The radiation belt was found around Saturn. Their finding on Enceladus turns everything they thought on their heads. Rhea, a moon of Saturn, has rings around it, completely baffling mainstream. They found an asteroid between Saturn and Uranus has rings. Uranus has rings. The magnetic field for Uranus is even more screwed up than its rotational axis. It's hot in all the wrong places. Even if the sun was pointing at the pole of the planet, it is warmer at the equator. Assuming nothing happened doesn't mean nothing happened. All these things are huge indications that something spectacular happened in our solar system not that long ago. The planets aren't where they're supposed to be. And because Saturn is so far off, they know that the only real answer is the Saturn hypothesis. By mainstream, our position in the Milky Way galaxy is wrong. And, well, you can just look up at it and see that we're 90 degrees off. The people's lack of intellectual curiosity is an enigma, crossing point with me. It's just, you know, when you see them ignoring things and it's blatant, that you only really can have one deduction. I heard Madame Blavatsky say a couple of things, and I'm not into her, but I found a few things she said intriguing. For example, her recipe for success in the world. Howl with the wolves. Reverence mediocrities in public favor. Shut your eyes to the truth, unpalatable to the leagues of the social herd. Bow low to any vulgarity and power, and pay loud applause to the rising donkey that kicks a dying lion, now a fallen idol. Madame Blavatsky. Huh. She said in the 1880s, the essential nature of matter is energy. Bears fruit. There are no evil spirits, only what we create with our own thoughts. Thoughts can manifest themselves into whatever one creates around them. Me, I had it all wrong. My intuition told me all along. There's a couple more notes. There can only be one reason that the Earth still has oxygen. That in vast deposits of iron in the ground, and Velikovsky brought it up. Why do we still have oxygen when the iron from the Earth should have mixed with it and oxidized it? Well, as Velikovsky states in his book, it can only mean the Earth continued to receive oxygen after the iron had hardened and locked in the ground. Being in the plasmasphere of a brown dwarf star would do that. And the myths from the whole world that talk about Jupiter being wrapped in bands and belts, and Saturn in chains, Mars being called Scarface, how could they possibly know this? And then people say there's a lot wrong with Egyptology. It isn't only Egyptology. It is every major field, authoritative Royal Society academia. Like cosmology, geology, all of them. Like one giant Warren report. All of them need an enema. And fairy tales for children are closer to the truth than academia teaches, for sadly. When I first heard that theory, that 7 major corporations basically own all of the media, academia, and the sciences, I laughed and thought it was the craziest thing I heard. But when I opened my eyes and I looked at the facts, it is so blatantly obvious what's going on. Then I found out there used to be a law against that, until one of the Bushes or Clinton signed a new law making that possible. Special interest groups should be illegal. You don't have to look far. A collusion of uniformity, Big Bang, evolution is the only path to the prizes and loot. And that is what matters to the high priests of man. We all know deep down that Atlantis was real, as well as giants, dwarves. I could write a book, but is it me, or is more information than ever coming out about everything? It's kind of crazy, but there really is a huge wake-up going on. But I like the fact that we do still have a say, and at least we have a forum, and that matters. Thanks to heroes like Velikovsky, who lit the fuse to a somewhat somnambulant world in 1950. Thank goodness some were paying attention. But just a couple more things. There's a couple of videos that are really intriguing. It's called Peter Warlow's Tippy Top Theory. Another one is the Saturn Hypothesis by Wayne Byrne. I found it very interesting. I know he doesn't agree with the Venus being born from Saturn or Jupiter theory, but can't agree on everything. Who knows? Maybe he's right. I recommend him. Check him out. Just wanted to let everybody know I appreciate you. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you. It's taught me there's a lot more people awake than I ever thought. But I am truly...
much, much younger than modern archaeology, mountain forming, death from cosmological disaster, and resettlement. Can we piece all these facts together? I believe we can. I also believe the timing of when these events happened is much, much younger than modern archaeology and science reckons on. Now, Ted Bryant, as does Wald Thornhill, has some serious reservations about current dating techniques in archaeology and paleontology. Whether it's carbon dating, thermoluminescence, uranium, thorium, there's some serious problems if you have an electromagnetic effect at the same time. Let's have a little look at this.
We tried thermoluminescence, and we had probably in Australia the best person for dating thermoluminescence, and that looks at a signature that starts in sand, and then the clock is zeroed, you bury it, and then the clock starts ticking. And it's not accurate. One, to 0 o'clock, it has to be in sunlight, so if a tsunami event occurs at night, the sand grains never get zeroed. We tried radiocarbon, and we thought radiocarbon was more precise, to find that it has flaws as well. It has these things called age reversals, and we're finding out a little bit more about age reversals. The carbon can be contaminated by more activity from the sun.
Cosmic rays.
Yeah, but it can also be contaminated if we flood the atmosphere with dead carbon.
Right.
And one of the ideas is that if we're looking at comet impacts, that these comets are hitting carbon-rich bottom sediment and flooding the atmosphere with dead carbon. So the age reversal causes an age reversal.
This means there'll have to be some drastic revision of the age of megafauna. Now currently Mungo Man is roughly aged at around 40,000 years old. The death of the megafauna in Australia around about 60,000. I believe both of these dates are way out. The death of the megafauna in Europe, North America and Russia is reckoned only in terms of some 10,000 years, maybe even less. I suspect the dates given in Australia are drastically wrong. If we equate this with the demise of the Clovis Indian, I think you'll probably have a similar reason for the demise of Mungo Man. Cosmic dramas do drastically affect current dating. But of course this is pure conjecture. We need to prove these facts. How do we go about doing it? Let's look at some of this Australian megafauna, see if it has this carbon pitting and iridium layers in the sand dune lunettes. Let's examine some of these bones at Lake Victoria and see if they display the same pittings as the megafauna. Only then can we lay to bed this conjecture. So how do we explain these dreadful cataclysms that decimated mankind? Modern archaeology and science don't have the answers. They reject mythology, they cling to outmoded theories. What happens today on planet Earth is nothing compared to the events of the not too distant past. The age of cataclysmic evolution and a chaotic solar system have arrived. Join us as we seek the truth.
We were up and down on the mountain. A river out to sea. We lift off to the stars above. Our spirits shine for free.